Thank you. Welcome once again. I am Brian LaPasse, Chief of Program Services for OPSC. We have quite a cast with us today. There's a lot of information today, and we accordingly have a nice big team with us. Michael Watanabe and Joshua Potter are here today, our Deputy Executive Officer and Operations Manager in Program Services. We also have Kevin Falk and Chelsea Harris Martinez as the Supervisor and Program Analyst for the Global Regulations item. Then we also have Casey Barr and Sandeep Singh, the supervisor and program analyst for the facility inspection tool item. Chelsea and Sandeep will be conducting our presentations today, but we're all available for questions. And I know you're going to have lots of them today. We hope anyway. There's a lot of important topics today, so we're looking forward to those questions. Also with us today, we have our friends Courtney MacArthur and Joshua Speaks from the California Department of Education. So just a little bit about our items today. The first items up are OPSCs, and as you probably know, we've been working diligently over the last 18 months or so, a little bit longer than that actually, on Prop 2 implementation, both creating new programs and adding a lot of really cool new features to existing programs. While we're busy doing that, we really had our regulations open. We're looking closely at other areas for improvement. And for that matter, over the last several years, whenever we notice areas where we can make improvements, a few of us keep a running list of what we call parking lot or wish list items that we can make improvements to. So we're going to be presenting another set of proposed changes today that include many of these parking lot items. Most of these are not big shifts in policy or process, but really just areas where we see opportunities to improve language, provide clearer language, or perhaps just straighten out some things that the way that we've been operating. It's a rather large item. It covers about 850 pages. The attachment, if you download it, it's pretty sizable. It's almost 1,000 pages. Before we start today, I'm gonna kind of show you how to navigate through that. But before I get to that, I just wanted to remind everyone about this global regulations item, just something to keep in mind. We presented these changes to you before. It's just been a little bit. We got really focused on, I guess, I would say maybe more pertinent or urgent changes that we needed to implement for Proposition 2. So we backburnered this one just a little bit, but it's been simmering away. It's still nice and fresh. So really my message on that is just that these have been presented before. We're presenting them again before we go to the SAB approval, just to make sure that you had a chance to review them once again and that you didn't forget about some of the stuff that we had in mind. So that's the global regulations item. After that, we're going to move on to the facility inspection tool. And as you probably remember, back in November of 2024, the California State Auditor issued recommendations for potential improvements to the FIT. So we're following those suggestions for now. And what we're presenting today are some options for consideration. It's important to note that we're not making recommendations today. We're just putting out some information that we think responds to the auditor's comments and just some things you can kind of see how they might look if we were to go that route. So again, these aren't necessarily recommendations. It's just some options and some things to consider. As we progress through this series of meetings on the FIT, we're going to begin to get more of a kind of a succinct look at exactly what we're going to be recommending. We want this to be as collaborative as possible. You'll remember that OPSC provides the FIT as a tool for you to use. We don't collect the information or use the information that's in these reports. We want to make sure that we're providing a tool that abides by the categories and components outlined in education code and creates something useful for you to use. But this isn't information that is critical to us. It's more of a tool that you can use, and so we really want this to be collaborative as possible while kind of following those recommendations that were outlined by the state auditor. So today is another kind of a sharing session, and we really want your input, and then we'll start to begin to form some recommendations going forward in the next series of meetings for that, for the FIT. After we get through those topics, we have our friends Courtney and Joshua from CDE with us. They're going to be talking about amendments to their Title V regulations to implement the $5 million state augmentation for, this is a mouthful, the Federal Supporting America's School Infrastructure Grant Program, or the SASE program. And then additionally, they're going to be discussing proposals for the creation of a certified private construction consultant certification list. You might or might not remember, but as part of Prop 2 provisions, and this ties into it, there's a new project and construction management grant that's available for eligible small school districts for assistance with their projects. And this certification, this consultant certification list ties into that grant. So they're carrying forward what was outlined in the statute in Prop 2 as part of AB 247. And they're going to be presenting their ideas to you today. And so I think you're going to be happy to hear what they have to offer. So just before we begin, I mentioned that today's PDF is rather large, and so I'm going to share my screen and just kind of show you maybe an easier way to kind of get through, um, that document if that's something that you're looking at either online or just following along with us, or maybe if you have it open later. Um, Hopefully everybody can see my screen here. So if you cruise up to this icon here, it's going to be the bookmark icon. If you open that up, our communications team has very nicely created bookmarks, and all these bookmarks, you can click on them and navigate to whatever the title is. So like this is the 5004. If we wanted to look at the grant agreement, we could click here, or if you want to go back to the beginning, you can go to the cover page. So I'm not going to be using these a whole lot today. I might use them a little bit. Our team is very good about instructing me what page to go to, and so I'm going to be typing them in here. But this is something that might be really helpful to you if, like, again, if you're cruising through this item, you're like, man, this is a lot of pages. I can't find the 5004. You can just come here and click on it and get right to the 5004. So many of you probably knew this already. I just wanted to make sure I covered it just in case it's something that makes it easier for you to navigate that large document. We also have bookmarks on the CDE items that are available, but they're not quite as long as 1,000 pages, so a little bit easy to navigate there. It sounds like a lot today, but I think we're going to be able to easily cover the information. It's really just a lot of forms and things that we need to put in here fully that create the page numbers. So please don't be intimidated by that. We're definitely looking forward to our presentations today. And with that, I think it's time to turn it over to Chelsea, and she's going to be talking about the global SFP regulatory amendments that we have for you today. Chelsea?
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. As Brian said, my name's Chelsea, and this portion of the meeting will continue the discussion regarding the proposed regulatory amendments that we started back at the March 13th, May 8th, and August 28th of last year's stakeholder meetings. We'll spend our time going over some feedback that we received as well, and some proposed amendments to SFP regs and forms. Before we dive into the specifics of everything, I just wanted to let y'all know that the item has been organized into 3 sections. First, Section A goes over newly proposed amendments. Section B will cover previously presented topics that received feedback and may include additional amendments. And Section C is previously presented topics that did not receive any additional feedback, at least as of preparing this item, and didn't have any additional amendments. For those following along with the PDF there with Brian too, I'll occasionally mention page numbers to help guide us through. And with that, I'll go ahead and dive right in. So we'll start on page 4 of the item and talk about some stakeholder feedback received after the August 28th stakeholder meeting and OPSC's response. In the first item, in response to OPSC's previous discussion on latest CBEDS report on SFP forms and the term enrollment reporting year as a proposed definition, stakeholders provided comment that selecting November 1st as the first acceptable date for using current school year enrollment data will not necessarily mean that the data has been verified by CDE. Further, stakeholders commented that by extension, using November 1st as the starting date for current enrollment may produce inaccurate data. OPSC staff acknowledged that census day enrollment verified data is not released until later, about the spring or summer the following academic year in which the data was collected. However, the CBEDS data is uniformly collected on Census Day, which is the first Wednesday in October, and the end date to submit the CBEDS data to CDE is October 31st. While the data is not externally verified by November 1st, it has been collected and submitted by then, indicating to external stakeholders and other agencies that the latest CBEDS data collection period has ended. If needed, the data can still be verified with DataQuest at a later date. Additionally, the phrase enrollment reporting year has been used to reference the time period between November 1st and October 31st throughout regulations. In the second item, the stakeholder provided comments in regards to the Form SAB 5004 and SAB 5010 that prompts the form filler to indicate whether the application is a hybrid application under the SFP. A stakeholder suggested the expansion of this section to include 2 additional prompts. One, to ask if other hybrid applications had already been submitted, and if yes, a prompt to provide the application numbers. OPSC staff appreciate this suggested expansion of the proposed hybrid application section for these forms. OPSC has incorporated the suggestion into the proposed changes. Additionally, we would like to note that there is additional changes proposed to the general information section on both forms that include information related to hybrid applications and required supporting documents. One of the required supporting documents is a district certification of all hybrid applications submitted or to be submitted, detailing a clear delineation of scope. The application numbers reported on the form SAB 5004 and SAB 5010 should match the supporting documentation. The third feedback item that a stakeholder requested OPSC reconsider the allowance of a district to use any enrollment data after census day of any given year to report enrollment for modernization eligibility purposes, and proposed that for the period between census day and October 31st, districts should be allowed to use the prior year or the current year's enrollment for modernization eligibility. OPSC maintains the position of uniformly reporting enrollment based on the November 1 through October 31 timeframe. While the enrollment data is collected on Census Day, the period in which to submit the Census Day data is open until October 31st, making November 1st the first day in which the latest enrollment data is available. As mentioned in the first feedback item, OPSC staff acknowledge that Census Day enrollment verified data is not released until a later date and would like to clarify the release date of verified enrollment information is not intended to be the supporting reason of when new enrollment data may or may not be utilized. Lastly, the fourth item, and in light of proposed amendments to clarify instructions for SDC enrollment on the form SAB 5001, a few stakeholders highlighted that current CalPADS does not specifically report aggregated special day class or SDC pupil enrollment. Further, the previously referenced special education enrollment by program setting or SEEPS report does not provide SDC enrollment data specifically. The SEEPS report provides data for special education pupils generally, which includes more than just SDC. A stakeholder outlined a couple of proposals and suggested updates to CBED's report references for OPSC's consideration. OPSC appreciates the input for SDC enrollment reporting, and of the 2 proposed solutions, OPSC has considered, amended, and incorporated the second proposal of instructing districts to report SDC pupils attending special day classes on Census Day and are included in the latest enrollment report to the CDE. Additionally, OPSC has removed the references of the report being available approximately October 15th of each year on the form SAB 5001 specific instructions. All right, and that wraps up our stakeholder feedback section and OPSC's responses. Thank you once again to everyone for taking the time to engage after that August 28th stakeholder meeting. and provide some feedback for us. Next, we'll move on to page 8 of this item, which is Section A, newly proposed amendments to SFP regulations and forms. We'll start with proposed amendments for SFP Regulation Section 1859.82.1, Facility Hardship Program, and Section 1859.82.2, Seismic Mitigation Program. OPSC identified that the references in Sections 1859.82.1 F6 and 1859.82.2 F6 are inaccurate. The proposed amendment seeks to change the reference from Section 2 to Section 5, as Section 5 is where the timelines are outdated to require the submittal of the Form SAB 5004 for funding and an updated Form SAB 5801 for projects that have received advanced design funding. So just kind of fixing a reference in that section. The next proposed amendment applies to the Form SAB 5004 application for funding. And for those who would like a visual of the proposed amendments, let's check out attachment A1E. That's on page 68. The Form SAB 5004 currently requires, in sections 23 and 24, a certification from the architect of record, licensed architect, and/or design professional. During the application review process, OPSC may request one or more revised SAB 5004s for various reasons. Anytime a Form SAB 5004 is requested, the district must obtain signatures from the architect of record, licensed architect, and/or design professional prior to signing and submitting the new form for OPSC's review. OPSC has consistently received feedback from applicants stating that sourcing signatures from these individuals can be a difficult and lengthy process, often resulting in a request for an extension to processing deadlines, which can result in some processing delays. As OPSC is currently processing applications submitted in 2023, many architects or design professionals may have moved on from the project in the funding application, or the contract with the applicant district has ended, or they've retired or become unreachable in some way or another. OPSC's current practice allows for a district representative to indicate that the individual is unavailable for the certification and to provide a narrative explanation as to why. When submitting a funding application online through OPSC's online application portal, Section 23 and 24 have a box that could be checked if the architect of record and/or design consultant for the project is no longer available for certification, which allows for the district representative to certify. Currently, statute does not require these certifications in Section 23 and 24 to be made exclusively by an architect of record, licensed architect, or design professional. So OPSC proposes that an authorized district representatives be allowed the option of signing in lieu of an architect of record, licensed architect, or design professional. And so we've proposed amendments specifically to Section 23 and 24 to add the option of a district representative to certify. As a result of this, there is also proposed amendments to Section 25 because Section 25 will have outdated certification language. Currently, the language states that the district representative is certifying to the information on the form with the exception of Sections 23 and 24, and OPSC proposed to add language that allows district representatives to certify to all the information on the form, inclusive of Sections 23 and 24, if they were the ones to certify to that section. All right, and that wraps up our first section A, as there was only a couple of topics to present. Next, we'll dive into section B, previously presented topics that received feedback as seen on page 10. Thank you, Brian. First, we'll start with the proposed amendments to Regulation Section 1859.2 definitions and Section 1859.60 calculation to determine modernization baseline eligibility. The proposed amendment to Section 1859.2 adds a definition for enrollment reporting year. Enrollment reporting year shall mean the time period beginning on November 1st and ending on October 31st of the following year. There has been consistent use of the term enrollment reporting year to mean this time period in other areas of regulation and in application processing. However, it's just not currently a defined term. So that proposed amendment adds the definition. The proposed amendment to Section 1859.60 amends language to clarify the enrollment reported should utilize the now defined enrollment reporting year based on the received date of the Form SAB 5003. The proposed language also aligns SFP Regulation 1859.60 with the Form SAB 5003 instructions, which point to the Form SAB 5001 for enrollment reporting. For a little bit of context, to report the enrollment on the Form SAB 5003, the form instructs districts to enter the latest CBEDS enrollment as it would have been reported utilizing the criteria for Parts A, C, and D of the Form SAB 5001. The Form SAB 5001 informs districts to utilize the latest CBEDS enrollment data and specifies that applications filed on or after November 1st must report the current school year enrollment. Further, CBEDS is an annual collection of data and of census day data, and that is collected on the first Wednesday in October. The CBEDS pupil enrollment data is due to CDE as part of the annual Fall 1 data submission in CalPADS by October 31st, and that information is available on CDE's DataQuest, which is a searchable database. Therefore, OPSC has long interpreted the enrollment reporting year to mean November 1 through October 31 of the following year. The proposed definition of enrollment reporting year in Section 1859.2 and amendments to Section 1859.60 seek to increase consistent language and implementation across SFP regulation. The next proposed amendments are for Section 1859.60 calculation to determine modernization baseline eligibility and 1859.78.6 modernization grant for 50 years or older permanent buildings. Currently, these regulation sections provide general guidance for when the aging of permanent and portable buildings shall start, but do not explicitly provide guidance on building aging for portables that have been relocated from another school site and/or have stockpile approval dates for modernization eligibility determination purposes. OPSC proposes that sections 1859.60 and 1859.78.6 be amended to specify that the 20, 25, or 50-year period shall begin 12 months after the plans for the construction or placement of the buildings were approved by the DSA. In the case of portable buildings that have been relocated from another school site or have a stockpile date, the 20-year period shall start 12 months after the plans for the placement of the portable building on the original school site were approved by the DSA. Additionally, these amendments will be applied prospectively once these proposed regulation amendments are effective. In the instance of stockpiled facilities, DSA approval date for the placement of the facility on a school site is to be used for the purpose of determining the start of the 20, 25, 50-year period for all new modernization eligibility establishments. However, currently established mod eligibility baselines that may have used stockpile approvals will not be required to be revised to use the DSA approved relocation placement date as a result of this amendment. Moving on to the next proposed amendment, we'll take a look at the enrollment projection certification form, aka the Form SAB 5001. If you would like to take a look at the actual form itself, that's attachment A1C, which starts on page 49. The current Form SAB 5001 instructions for Part D are outdated. The form instructions currently instruct districts to report special day class or SDC pupils as shown and reported within the California Special Education Management Information System, or CASEMIS, to the CDE in December prior to the latest CBEDS report. Pupil enrollment data is collected on Census Day and has transitioned from CASEMIS to CBEDS and CalPADS. As mentioned earlier in the stakeholder feedback section, pupil enrollment data is due to the CDE by October 31st. Currently, there is no specific report for special day class pupils within CalPADS report data to CDE's DataQuest website. OPSC proposes an amendment to the Form SAB 5001 that instructs districts to report SDC pupil enrollment, which would have been included on the Census Day pupil enrollment data, and to specify October instead of the prior December. The last amendment is in Section B is in regards to hybrid applications, reporting them on the application for funding Form SAB 5004 and the Career Technical Education Facilities Funding Form SAB 5010. For those who would like a visual, you can check out attachment A1E on page 67. This is specifically the 5004, but it looks the same on the 5010. Currently, the Form SAB 5004 sections 10 through 12 allow applicants to report any application number that received prior approvals under the lease purchase program, prior apportionment under the SFP, and preliminary apportionment to final apportionment, as well as to indicate in Section 20 if CTE funds will be requested as applicable. The Form SAB 5010 requires applicants to report the qualifying SFP project application number in Section 6. But for both of these forms, there is not currently a section to report hybrid applications. In light of the proposed hybrid application terminology, which we'll talk about in Section C of this presentation, and having already received and funded several forms of hybrid applications, OPSC proposes amendments to the Form SAB 5004 and Form SAB 5010 to allow applicants to report if the application is intended to be a hybrid application. The proposed amendment will prompt the applicant to indicate if the application for funding is or is not a hybrid application. If it is the first hybrid application to be submitted, it will provide an indication that it will share DSA plan sets with a forthcoming funding application. If it is a subsequent hybrid application, meaning a separate SAB administered program funding application has previously been received by OPSC and or has already received funding, the applicant can also indicate the application number. In addition, OPSC proposes amendments to the Form SAB 5004 and the Form SAB 5010 general information and specific instructions sections that detail the required documents for hybrid applications. All right, and that wraps up Section B, previously presented topics that received feedback. I'll pause for just a moment to allow for any questions and just a minute for us to process what's been presented so far before continuing.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, a lot of really good information there. We're not having any questions right now, but we could pause for a minute just to see if anything comes up. Thanks again for covering that so delicately. A lot of interesting changes there for us to digest. Let's see. Not seeing any questions. I think we can continue.
All right, I'll carry on. So Section C is previously presented topics that did not receive any additional feedback, and that starts on page 13, which we're on right now. Just to let you guys know, I will briefly go over these topics. For additional information, we've attached the previous stakeholder meeting covers and attachments that can be seen in attachment A1J that starts on page 281, but we don't have to hop there now, just to kind of loop y'all in where to find it. So starting us off is Regulation Section 1859.2, definitions. OPSC proposes an amendment to add a definition for a hybrid application. It is defined as a funding application that shares the same DSA-approved plans and specifications with at least one or more funding application. Secondly, OPSC proposes an update to the definition of large charter school to revise the enrollment threshold for a large charter school to be greater than 350 pupils. Next, a clarifying amendment is proposed for Regulation Section 1859.22, application for funding on leased land. The SFP allows for applications for funding on facilities that are or will be located on real property leased to the school district, provided that certain conditions are met. The real property must be leased from a government agency, and depending on other conditions, the term of the lease for the land at the time the approved application is accepted must either be 25, 30, or 40 years, depending on the agency. The proposed amendment is to specify that the 25, 30, or 40-year requirement is specific to the remaining term of the lease at the time the approved application is accepted. Another proposed amendment is to Section 1859.51, adjustments to new construction baseline eligibility, and 1859.60, calculations to determine modernization baseline eligibility. In order to align with the California Preschool Transitional Kindergarten and Full-Day Kindergarten Facilities Grant Program Statute, Regulation Section 1859.32N was recently approved to clarify that classrooms built under this FDPK program will be excluded from the gross classroom inventory determined in 1859.31 and not counted for the purposes of determining a district's new construction eligibility establishment. So Section 1859.51I is amended to specify that the district's new construction eligibility will not be adjusted for classrooms added to a school site with this program funding after the new construction baseline eligibility was determined by the board. And Section 1859.60 is amended to clarify that classrooms and square footage constructed with this program funding will not be included in the calculation to determine modernization baseline eligibility and will be excluded from the baseline snapshot. Moving on to the next proposed amendment, we'll discuss Section 1859.70 General. The proposed amendment clarifies that increases to the pupil grant request in the Form SAB 5004 shall, in most cases, require the withdrawal and resubmittal of the funding application. Increases to the initial pupil grant request for modernization applications will only be allowed for an application to comply with the requirements in Section 1859.79.3, which requires a modernization application to request at least 52 non-severe grants, 36 severe grants, or 101 K-12 grants. School districts with less than the required minimum available must request all remaining eligibility at the site. Should an application request be less than the required minimum, OPSC will advise the applicant that the pupil grant request in the application must be increased to the minimum amount necessary to satisfy the requirements of Section 1859.79.3. Increases to the initial pupil grant request for a new construction application will only be allowed in the instances of where the change in classroom redesignation results in higher number of pupil grants to match the loading standard. OPSC also proposes amendments to Section 1859.71.2, new construction additional grant for fire code requirements. Currently, the additional grant for automated sprinkler system can be provided to all new construction projects based on the date specified in 1859.71.2C1 through 3. These parameters are outdated. Senate Bill 575, Chapter 725 Statute of 2001, known as the Green Oaks Fire Protection Act, added Education Code Section 17074.50 through 17074.56, which requires that all new construction projects submitted to the DSA on or after July 1st, 2002 include an automatic fire detection alarm and sprinkler system. Therefore, the proposed amendment to Section 1859.71.2 clarifies that all new construction applicants for which the DSA approved plans and specs include fire sprinklers qualify for this grant. Next, we'll review the proposed amendments for Section 1859.77.2 and 1859.77.3, use of new construction grant funds. These regulation sections regarding the criteria for use of grants requests do not currently contemplate the requirement in SFP Regulation Section 1859.51E to process applications under new construction eligibility derived from the prior current fiscal year's enrollment data. Additionally, the use of grant regulations do not consider that applications are currently processed in arrears. SFP Regulation Section 1859.77.2B1 and 1859.77.3B1 require the adoption of a school board resolution discussed at a public hearing at a regularly scheduled meeting of the district's governing board on a date that precedes the SFP application receipt date. The proposed amendment removes that requirement in SFP Regulation Section 1859.77.2B1 and 77.3B1. Additionally, school districts intending to amend an approved application to include a use of grants request after its submittal to OPSC are currently required to withdraw and resubmit the application and receive a new OPSC receive date. The proposed amendment removes those requirements and allows applicants to amend approved applications to include use of grant requests during processing without having to withdraw and resubmit the funding application. Next, OPSC puts forth amendments to Section 1859.81 Financial Hardship. The proposed amendment to Regulation Section 1859.81A adds language to clarify that independent audit required by Education Code Section 41020 for the fiscal year immediately preceding the request for financial hardship must be submitted with the submittal package. This clarifies that it is not just the latest audit submitted by the district that is required to be provided. Next, we'll briefly review the proposal for Section 1859.81.1, separate apportionment for site acquisition and design cost. Current regulation requires that subsequent applications for a new construction or modernization adjusted grant that previously received a separate design and/or site apportionment request a minimum percentage of the grant requested in the separate design or site application, which is 50% for new construction and 60% for modernization. This requirement ensures that applicants do not receive a separate design or site apportionment disproportionate to the final project. On the subsequent application for the full construction grant request, the requested minimum percentage could be misinterpreted as being required to request a percentage of the dollar value of the district's requested at the time of separate design or site apportionment. Additionally, the language requires clarification for the district's pupil grant request on the subsequent application be for a valid amount, which would consider any eligibility updates required or voluntary that may have been processed after the separate design or site apportionment. The proposed amendment to Section 1859.81.1 clarifies that the amount must be requested on the subsequent application for the full construction apportionment after the application previously received a separate design or site apportionment is the percentage of the pupil grants previously requested. Further, the subsequent new construction or modernization adjusted grant must take into consideration any eligibility changes as well. Now we'll look at Section 1859.83b, small size projects. Section 1859.83b provides an excessive cost hardship grant for small size projects, currently defined as applications housing 200 pupils or fewer. For K through 6 projects, the 12% supplemental grant amount for small size projects is currently provided for applications housing 4 classrooms or fewer worth of pupils. The 4% amount is provided for applications housing more than 4 classrooms, not to exceed 8 classrooms worth of pupils. However, the grant currently does not align with the loading standards of 7 through 8 or 9 through 12 classrooms, and those projects would need to house fewer than 8 fully loaded classrooms of pupils to qualify for the grant. The proposed amendment raises the excessive cost hardship grant limits for small size grant for middle and high school applicants to align with 7, 8, and 9, 12 classroom loading standards. The revision is to align the pupil grant thresholds to SFP loading standards so that the threshold for all K through 12 projects to receive the 12% allowance is 4 classrooms or fewer of capacity, and the threshold to receive the 4% allowance is more than 4 classrooms, not to exceed 8 classrooms of capacity. For projects that span grade levels with multiple loading capacities, the loading capacity of the highest grade level served will be used to determine the threshold. Next, we'll just quickly mention for Section 1859.90.2, the priority funding process, the proposed amendment to this section corrects a typo to accurately reference Section A6 instead of Section A5. Next, we'll go over the proposed amendment for Section 1859.105, Program Accountability Progress Audit. After a design and/or separate site apportionment, SFP regulations do not include a requirement to submit a completed approved application for the new construction or modernization adjusted grant phase of the project funding. This creates a situation in which a district may receive a design and/or separate site apportionment use the funds to design facilities and/or purchase the site, and never submit a funding application to construct facilities on the site. The proposed addition of Section 1859.105D and Section 1859.105E requires that applications for separate design and/or site funding must submit an approved new construction adjusted grant application or modernization adjusted grant application of the project within a specified time, or have the design and/or site apportionment be reduced to cost incurred, and states that failing to submit, and additionally states that failing to submit a Form SAB 5006 would result in the board rescinding the apportionment and require the return of the apportionment plus any interest earned on state funds. OPSC proposes a couple of amendments to Section 1859.106, a program accountability expenditure audit. Education Code Section 41024 requires that expenditures be identified on a project-by-project basis. Therefore, OPSC proposes to reiterate in Section 1859.106 that a separate audit report is required for every audited project, and multiple projects cannot be combined in one audit report. Education Code Section 41024C5 requires that in the event of an audit finding, OPSC shall ensure that the local education agency has corrected the audit finding by implementing a required penalty repayment of funds equal to the amount of funds disallowed in the audit finding. Therefore, an additional amendment is proposed to clarify that if there is an ineligible expenditure found as part of an audit finding, the district will be required to reimburse the full amount of the item found ineligible. Next, we'll discuss the proposed changes to Section 1859.171, Use of Facility. The proposed amendment adds clarity to the process of identifying a qualifying successor charter school in the event the charter school occupying a facility funded with charter school facility program funds cease to utilize the facility for charter school purposes. Specifically, it emphasizes the requirement that school districts where the facility is physically located and that serves the same grade level as the pupils housed in the CSFP project that funded the facility may elect to take possession and title of the facility only after demonstrating due diligence in soliciting alternative charter schools in the local area to identify a successor charter school. Now we'll consider some regulation Section 1859.192A3 and 1859.192B4, Career Technical Education Facilities Program Eligibility. For standalone new construction or modernization career technical education facility program projects, SFP Regulation Section 1859.192 does not currently include the criteria for how a project may qualify for CTEFP funding related to occupancy date for new construction and contract dates for modernization. For new construction CTEFP applications, the language adds a requirement that the facilities were not occupied prior to the implementation of the CTEFP. And for modernization projects, the proposed amendment requires that the construction contracts was executed on or after the implementation of CTEFP. All right, lastly, we'll review one more regulation, and that's for Section 1859.193, Career Technical Education Facilities Grant Determination. During previous CTE processing rounds, applicants who had received an apportionment as a reservation of funds requested to amend approved equipment lists. These requests have been to swap out certain model of equipment for a newer model, or swap out a certain model of equipment out for a different but equivalent model, to either ensure that the equipment would have an average useful life expectancy of at least 10 years, or for cost-saving purposes. These requests were previously considered as change of scope to an approved application and required a school district appeal request, Form SAB 189, to be submitted and presented to the board for approval. The proposed amendment allows for applicants to be able to purchase up-to-date equipment that will have an average useful life expectancy of at least 10 years at the time of purchase, pursuant to Education Code Section 17078.72a, and for applicants to have greater flexibility in delivering cost-effective projects to meet the original intent of the project without requiring an appeal to be submitted for the board for approval. All right, so we got through previously proposed regulation amendments. Now we'll go over previously proposed form amendments. For those who would like a visual, you can check out attachment A1D, specifically page 56, for the proposed amendment regarding the Form SAB 5002, existing school building capacity. This proposed amendment updates the specific instructions for the substantial enrollment requirement adjustment in Part 3 to clarify that non-severe and severe classroom capacity cannot be allocated across all grade levels and instead must be reported under their respective column. If we skip over to pages 67 through 70, you'll see the proposed amendments for an application for funding Form SAB 5004. First, I'll go over project progress dates on the form. The proposed amendment updates the specific instructions for Section 17 and 19 to specify that construction contracts executed on or after August 22nd, 2022 that include modular construction via piggyback contracting are not eligible for funding and will be returned to the applicant unprocessed. This is consistent with the board's action taken at the February 2006 meeting and reaffirmed at the June 22nd, 2022 SAB meeting. Second, we'll look at construction delivery method. The proposed amendment updates Section 19 to correct a typo. The proposal lists developer build in Section 19 instead of developer built. To have accurate construction delivery methods terminology, we just made that little change there. Third, in the certification section, the proposed amendments to Section 25 adds a certification pursuant to Education Code Section 17584, stating that the district is in compliance with the required inclusion of faucet aerators and water-conserving plumbing fixtures in all bathrooms. A second proposed amendment adds a certification with language directly from Education Code Section 1707.63, stating that the district understands that the total funding provided under this chapter shall constitute as the state's full and final contribution to the project. A third proposed amendment adds certification language for hybrid applications. In this certification, the district understands that additional related hybrid applications are still subject to review by OPSC and approval by the SAB, and future funding is not guaranteed. Now we'll look at page 72 to see proposed amendments for the fund release form, which is Form SAB 5005. The proposed amendment to the general information section removes the requirement that accepted bid documents, including additive, deductive alternates, be attached for new construction projects that complete Part 5. Only the signature pages of the construction contracts, not accepted bid documents, are required to substantiate certifications made in Part 5 of the Form SAB 5005. Next, on page 78, we present proposed amendments for the application for Career Technical Education Facilities Funding, or the SAB 5010 form. Specifically looking at the certification section, one proposed amendment adds certification language directly from Education Code Section 17070.63, stating that the district understands the total funding provided under this chapter shall constitute as the state's full and final contribution to the project. And another proposed amendment adds certification language also for hybrid applications. In this certification, the district understands that additional related hybrid applications are still subject to review by OPSC and approval by the SAB, and future funding is not guaranteed. And then lastly, we'll give a brief reminder of the previously proposed amendments for the grant agreement forms. We won't show those pages right now because it's a lot of pages. However, you may check them out. They're in attachments A1H and A1J, which start on pages 80 and 178 respectively. To align with two proposed amendments to SFP Regulation 1859.106, OPSC proposed amendments to the grant agreement, specifically to Section F, Item 4I, to clarify that separate audit reports shall be submitted for each audited project pursuant to Education Code Section 41024. Additionally, in Section F, Item 4, also subsection 4, OPSC proposes amendments to remove language stating that the amount to be remitted in the event of an audit determines grants were spent on ineligible expenditures will be limited to the proportionate percentage of grants and financial hardship grants to clarify that the district will need to reimburse the full amount of the item found ineligible to align with Education Code Section 41024 C5. Similarly, we also propose amendments to Section F, Item 5, Subsection 4, to remove language stating that the amount to be remitted in the event of an audit determined savings were spent on ineligible expenditures will be limited to the savings. And then just to note, OPSC currently has two grant agreements in circulation due to the March 26, 2025 board approval of the new grant agreement for applications received on or after October 31st, 2004. The revision date 0325 grant agreement for Proposition 2 includes expanded eligible expenditures as a result of the passage of Prop 2, and OPSC proposes minor additions or minor edits to revision 1022 of the non-Prop 2 and revision date March of 2025, the Prop 2 grant agreement versions. All right, and that concludes the proposed amendments to SFP regulations and form, old and new, that we prepared for you today. For more information, feel free to review everything in the cover and the attachments. And thank you all again for your time and attention, especially since that was a lot of information. I'll hand the mic back over to Brian now.
Thank you, Chelsea. Yeah, great information. Really want to thank Chelsea for walking through those so carefully. It is a lot to digest. And I really wanted to thank everybody for your patience as well. These are topics, a lot of them, the majority of them that we've covered before, but we felt like it was important to go back through them just because we've had kind of a lengthy time since we last presented them. So thank you for sitting through that, being patient. We think it's really important that you all fully understand exactly what we're proposing. So again, thank you, Chelsea, so much for being so thorough, and thank all of you for your patience. We have a couple of questions, but before we do that, I think Kevin has something he'd like to add. So Kevin, if you would.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. Just want to reiterate what Brian said. Chelsea did a great job, so thank you, Chelsea. I did want to draw attention to one thing that I noticed. So if we go to the top of page 15 of the item, we made a slight error in the organization of this item. Some of the text for our proposed changes to the use of grant, deconstruction use of grant funds, sections 77.2 and 77.3 inadvertently got moved to be under section 71.2 for the fire code requirements. So I just want to go over what those previously proposed changes to the use of grants reg sections were about. We are proposing the removal of certain requirements to use a use of grants request for new construction. One of those is a timing requirement that the resolution authorizing the use of grants request that's passed by the district's governing board no longer needs to be passed by the governing board prior to app receipt. This allows for more flexibility in instances where new construction eligibility is shifting from when the app was received to when we're processing the application. And additionally, we propose removing a requirement that requires the amendment of a submitted application to include a use of grants request to be withdrawn and resubmitted. We propose removing that requirement. We haven't been implementing that recently in processing. Again, we want to allow districts to have more flexibility in how they support their applications when new construction eligibility is shifting. All I want to point out. So thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that's very helpful. Again, a lot of details to cover here. So thank you, Kevin. We did have a couple questions. I'm going to go ahead and read those out. The first one, let's see, it was on the revisions for the Form SAB 5004 architect's signature. If the district signs in lieu of the design professional, will the district rep still need to certify on section 26? Yes, if the district rep signs in lieu of the design professional, the district rep still needs to certify section 26. That is that certifies all the information on the form is true and accurate, and with the exceptions of 24 and 25, unless they certify to it. So sections 24 and 25 are limited to specific items related to the plans and specs and cost estimates. So the district representative still would need to certify to the rest of the information on the form, which they would do in section 26. So yes, the answer is yes to that, long and short of it. And then the next question, referring to page 14, the statement, the use of grant regulations do not consider applications are currently processed in arrears. It's my understanding that the term arrears applies specifically to late payments. Perhaps backlog processing is more applicable to use of grants applications since they are not past due. Thanks for the feedback on that. We'll review the language and adjust it as necessary for the SAB. So appreciate that comment very much. Those are the only Q&As we had. I'll give everybody just a chance to raise your hand if you have any other questions before we jump into our next topic, which is going to be facility inspection tool. Give us all just a minute to take a deep breath too. That was quite a lot of info. So again, thank you for being so patient with us. We felt it was necessary to go through all that, so we really appreciate your time. Okay, just as a reminder too, in situations like this where we do have a lot of attachments and a lot of written information, you might be reviewing this later on, or you might be watching the recording if you didn't have a chance to be with us live right now. And so if that's the case and you have comments, for the next couple of weeks, we'll be accepting any input you might have. You can email that to our communications team or to any one of us. We'll accept it past 2 weeks, but within the next 2 weeks really gives us the opportunity to include it in our next item. So we do like to receive that feedback quickly, but again, we don't want to miss out on it. So if it is after that, if you're maybe watching this 3 or 4 weeks from now, please still feel free to send that information in and we'll consider it. And we appreciate all that input very much. So that's very important to us. Okay, see no other questions. I am going to reshare my screen and open this up for Sandeep to present on the facility inspection tool.
All right, thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandeep Singh, and today I will be discussing the potential updates for consideration to the facility inspection tool, also known as the FIT. So as a refresher on what the FIT is an optional tool for California school districts to use for evaluating facilities so that all students have access to clean, safe, and functional facilities. Currently, the FIT is comprised of 8 categories to create a score or ranking and includes 15 components that are outlined in statute. For reference, the current version of the FIT can be seen on attachment B1B of this item. Before we continue, I'm just going to give a quick overview of what this presentation will consist of. So first, we will address the stakeholder feedback that has been received since the last presentation of this item back on October 30th of last year. For anyone interested in reviewing the prior stakeholder presentation, we have included a link to the presentation and item for reference. October 30th meeting, OPSC invited stakeholder input on the FIT recommendations by the California State Auditor. In that presentation, OPSC provided background on the FIT, a detailed description of the current FIT, and a summary of the State Auditor's recommended changes. After reviewing the feedback, we will then go over the State Auditor's recommended changes to the FIT and review some potential updates in light of those recommendations. Please note that while we have provided examples of potential changes to the FIT, at this time, OPSC has not chosen which recommendations to move forward with, as they are presented for discussion purposes only. With that being said, let's dive into the feedback we received. So for feedback item 1, a stakeholder suggested that the FIT should also address indoor air quality even in the absence of mechanical heating, ventilation, and HVAC. Additionally, the stakeholder indicated that the current language in the FIT is not clear regarding this topic and should be clarified to the state that an inspector should record whether there is a reliance on mechanical or natural ventilation in an area for purposes of assessing indoor air quality. In response to this, OPC has included potential clarifying language within the FIT instructions for the inspector to indicate in the comments section whether an area being assessed relies on mechanical or natural ventilation, and this can be seen on attachment B1F. For feedback item 2, a stakeholder suggested that the current FIT details addressing indoor air quality should be enhanced by requiring readily accessible objective data. The stakeholder noted that relying solely on visual inspections has limitations, as it may not identify issues that are not visually detectable. Additionally, the stakeholder indicated that the state auditor's report suggests that the subjectivity in the scoring scale does not effectively quantify deficiencies. Further considerations that should be taken into account on the FIT include the presence of temperature and humidity monitoring devices within the area, the readings observed during the inspection, and any recorded data on extreme values where available. In response, OPSC has proposed additional language that can be seen on attachment B1F on stamped page 986. Here you can see that the inspector may indicate in the comments whether an area relies on mechanical or natural ventilation, whether a device for monitoring temperature and humidity is present in the area and what it shows at the time of inspection, as well as temperature and humidity extremes. So back to page 853 of the item. For feedback item 3, a stakeholder suggested that the FIT and any reporting based on the FIT, such as state accountability report cards, should include a disclaimer about the limitations associated with the FIT. In response to this, we advise that the FIT is an optional form and isn't submitted to OPSC for review or evaluation. Districts have the option to use an appropriate locally created inspection tool. OPSC also does not have involvement in the state accountability report cards that are prepared by local educational agencies. The FIT currently indicates that it is designed to identify areas of a school site that are in need of repairs based on a visual inspection of the site, which accurately reflects the FIT's intent. With all that in mind, OPSC welcomes any potential disclaimer language from stakeholders. For feedback item 4, a stakeholder suggested that OPSC consider other ways to improve data collection, retention, and transparency as it relates to the FIT. Additionally, the stakeholder had also expressed concern regarding the lack of data tracking around the FIT or local equivalents at both the state and local level. In response, as mentioned earlier, OPSC does not evaluate, track, or record any information, as this is an optional tool. That being said, OPSC encourages school districts to keep records of their annual FIT inspections. For feedback item 5, a stakeholder suggested that the presence of hazardous materials like chemical waste and flammable materials should be marked as an extreme deficiency due to the fact that they pose a threat to students and staff. In response to this, OPSC has prepared a hazardous materials detail sheet in an effort to help stakeholders examine the hazardous details category more thoroughly, and can be seen on attachment B1E, which we will review momentarily. All right, so that concludes the review of stakeholder feedback that was received as a result of our last presentation. I'll pause here for a moment for any questions.
Not seen any so far. Oh, here we do. We do have one. Does OPSC have any guidance for districts that intend to adopt their own inspection program that meets the basic intent of the FIT inspection? Do we have any guidance for districts that intend to adopt their own inspection program? I would just say, and anybody else, please feel free to add, but you just want to make sure you're following the requirements that are in the education code that are outlined for these types of inspections. Aside from that, um, I'm not sure if we have any advice. You just want to make sure that again you're conducting your inspections in accordance with the education code requirements. Is it the intent of OPSC to develop the FIT as a compliance tool rather than a periodic inspection tool? No, I don't think that's our intent. And again, anybody jump in if they disagree, but that our intent is to provide this as a resource for you in order to make your inspections easier. Um, we have access just like anybody else to what the requirements are, and we've developed this in hopes that it's helpful for you when you're doing your inspections. Okay. Oh, here's another one from Janelle Harris. With respect to the FIT stakeholder process, would you please clarify what is anticipated regarding next steps, timeline, ultimate deliverables? Thank you. For next steps, we're going to continue to present our thoughts, based off of the feedback we get today, and considering what the state auditor recommended. We're going to start to, today, and like we've mentioned already, both Sandeep and I, today is intended to continue to explore options. We don't have any recommendations today, really. We're still kind of feeling it out. We will transition into that phase though, where we're going to start proposing changes potentially to the FIT or improvements to it. The timeline of that, I don't know exactly. We are balancing other items and other, just as important priorities. This is a priority for us though, and we are intending to continue to address the FIT. I don't know the exact timelines, but I don't think we'll have as big of a break as we've had between the last meeting and this meeting till our next meeting. So we do intend to continue to work on this. And then ultimate deliverables will just be potentially an updated form that will have any changes that we agree upon and that we present in this format and in this series of meetings to the FIT. And then we're also going to have an electronic version of the FIT created that'll be embedded in OPSC Online. So there'll be the Excel version that we have available now, and then we're going to have a web-based, browser-based interface for you to access through OPSC Online. Let's see. Another question or perhaps a comment. I am completely in favor of improving transparency. However, we could have a credibility issue with past inspections. Is the state going to issue anything to help districts address the potential issue of school inspections reporting lower facility conditions? Specifically, the inspection changes may result in lower rating, but this does not mean that the facility has deteriorated since the last inspection. What information will the state provide to help districts address parent concerns? That's a really good question. Um, we don't have a lot of control over the local aspect of who is conducting the inspections. We've heard a lot of comments, not just this time around, but the last time that we had any FIT changes a few years back. I can't remember exactly the timeline. Um, this was a big concern, and we hear you on it, but it's really not our role to oversee accuracy. We're going to create guidelines that are going to inform you on what the education code requires and how to better complete it per what the California State Auditor's recommendations were. But we don't have any ability to oversee the accuracy at a local level. Um, so we're hoping that by providing you a very accurate form that follows the guidelines and that considers the changes that the state auditor is recommending, that we can be helpful in that regard. Some of the recommended changes would require a higher level of proficiency to perform the inspection, including the comment about indoor air quality. The intent of the fit inspection was originally that it could be performed by non-technical people. If we add more inspection categories that require technical expertise, it will limit districts' ability to perform objective inspections without a contractor or consultant. This will be particularly difficult for a small district that doesn't have the resources to perform some of these inspections. Thank you. That's definitely a comment we've heard before, and definitely something that we're factoring into our considerations for any recommendations we're going to be making. Thank you very much for that. Okay, I think we can move on, Sandeep.
All right, so next as we begin discussing the potential updates related to the fit based on the state auditor's recommendations, those who need a quick refresher of the recommended changes to the fit can find it on page 854 of this item. We will leave those on screen for a few seconds so you can quickly read those before we continue. So on stamped page 855, we will start with the first recommendation that OPSC adopt a broader range of deficiency ratings, as well as adjust the weighting of ratings to provide a more accurate assessment of each school's compliance with good repair standards. As you can see within the chart on screen here, OPSC has prepared updates to the Part 2 Evaluations Details section of the FIT's user instructions for stakeholder consideration. This includes the addition of a new rating level known as minor deficiency, marked as MD, which is intended to monitor deficiencies that may be minor or cosmetic in nature and pose no health or safety concerns. Examples of instances that would qualify for this rating include, but are not limited to, things like stained curtains or rugs and scratches on surfaces. In addition to this category, a slight refinement of the deficiency category, which clarifies that it involves a deficiency that is not cosmetic in nature and has clear evidence that repairs or corrective actions are needed, but does not pose an immediate health or safety issue. An immediate health or safety issue would be characterized as an extreme deficiency, which is also included in this chart as well. Overall, the intention of this addition is to distinguish the different ratings to support an accurate assessment of the status and condition of school facilities, with the goal of enhancing the district's ability to make informed and transparent decisions related to their facilities. In addition to the modified deficiency ratings as seen on page 856, the state auditor also recommended that OPSC adjust the weighting of various ratings. For purposes of the stakeholder meeting, OPSC is presenting the concept of the minor deficiency rating and will address any potential weighting changes in a future meeting based upon stakeholder feedback. I'll pause here for any questions related to this.
Sandeep, I just want to mention to our stakeholders, this is one area as we go through each one of these of what the state auditor has recommended and other stakeholders. We are looking for feedback. Previously, this minor deficiency category did not exist. So the calculations on the fit are simply the ratio of OKs to other categories, with extreme deficiencies automatically getting a poor rating. So by adding this other category, we need to figure out how to mathematically most likely incorporate minor deficiency into that calculation. Do we add it to the OK score as a proportion of all the ratings, or is it added to the deficiency and extreme deficiency categories, or we do a prorated score or some kind of weighting? So if you have suggestions, certainly send something in writing, and then we can map that out in a future item of what scores would look like based on those different logics.
All right, we do have a question. Fit inspections are not tied to funding. After adopting the Williams legislation, there was 800 million allocated for deferred maintenance. If a district identifies major deficiencies that it cannot address, such as a major system replacement, is there any recommendation for districts that lack the funding to address those items so it doesn't look like the district is negligent? I think, the fit is intended to inform the district on perhaps what might be maintenance priorities. There's also we have programs available that could help address those things, such as modernization through the school facility program, and in cases where it's severe, facility hardship might be more appropriate. For those of you that aren't really well versed in facility hardship, essentially what differentiates between regular modernization funding, which is, for ongoing kind of age-related maintenance. Facility hardship is when you have a very severe acute issue that is an imminent health and safety issue. So hopefully you never have one of those, but if you do, we have a program that's available for that. It includes seismic mitigation, but if there's like, for instance, if you have a structural issue and there's a danger, pardon me, there's a danger of the building collapsing, that could extend out to the facility hardship program and become something that you might want to pursue immediate funding for. So that's kind of my best advice on that. Also, anybody participating in the SFP does have a statutory requirement for routine restricted maintenance account of 3% of that. I think it's of the general fund of the district, their operating budget, and so you could perhaps use that funding to address some of those needs as well. Let's see. Previous inspections were largely subjective. The current trend appears to be more objective. If this is the issue, if this is an issue with consistency and calibration, has there been any discussion about training or certification for qualified inspectors? We don't intend to provide training. We do want to create guidelines, how to inform and better complete the fit and in any of your inspections, per the audit recommendations that we received. But we don't really plan on providing training. We're not experts on inspections either. And so that's something that you would need to do locally. Okay. I think that's all the questions for right now, Sandeep.
Okay, so the next recommendation on page 856 is for OPSC to provide detailed examples for each section and deficiency level, as well as include guidance in the FIT on the assessment of specialized learning environments. With regard to these recommendations, OPSC is requesting feedback for a potential resource guide that could address both of these recommendations. As a distinction, this resource guide would serve as an additional supplementary resource and would not lengthen the FIT's instructions. The next recommendation suggests additional guidance for scoring individual locations with multiple deficiencies. OPSC has a potential option that for any buildings or areas that receive one or more deficiency scores, the FIT would instruct an evaluator to indicate an action plan within the comments section. As seen on page 857, if the area or location contains multiple deficiencies, the district should report the following in the comments section: the maintenance or repairs needed to meet the good repair standards, an action plan to address maintenance or timing of the repair, and any work orders associated with the maintenance or repair. Following that, the district would then compare the multiple deficiencies from last year's FIT assessment to the current year's assessment. For the next recommendation on this page, the state auditor suggested removing the aggregated scoring of the categories and evaluate the scores based upon a section-by-section scoring. To demonstrate the difference in total rating between the current FIT scored by categories and the proposed FIT that is scored by sections, OPSC has provided side-by-side comparisons on attachment B1D starting on page 982 of this item. Comparison A's first chart uses the current FIT and the same data used in the auditor's report as seen in Appendix B of the audit report. The second chart in Comparison A mirrors the suggested updates to the FIT, which adds the additional minor deficiency category and removes the total percentages per category. Please note that for the purposes of attachment B1D, the total number of minor deficiencies in the recommended FIT were absorbed into the number of deficiencies in the current FIT and does not impact the percentages. The ranking system is based upon each section's rank rather than average of the sections for each comprised category. Between these two, the current fit scoring system yields an average percentage of the 8 categories of 61.41%. Using the same data, the recommended fit yields an average percentage of the 15 sections of 65.93%. If we look at comparison B on page 982, this compares the current fit and recommended fit, but includes additional extreme deficiencies. This comparison uses a total of 8 extreme deficiencies between the current fit and the recommended fit to see how the recommended elimination of categories affects the overall rating when multiple extreme deficiencies are present. The current fit averages a percentage of the 8 categories of 46.2%, while the recommended fit averages a percentage of 45.26%, which is a slight decrease. With that in mind, I will pause here again for any questions.
Again, this is a lot to absorb in the moment, but we wanted to make sure we articulated it for you. It might be something that you want to kind of look into, later today, maybe tomorrow, next week. But please take some time to take a look at it if it's interesting to you. And we're very eager to hear any comments you might have on it.
I'll mention we got a stakeholder comment after we had published this item, mentioning that back, and we talked about this in the first stakeholder meeting, but these categories and the combination of categories was created back, I believe back in 2009 when we revised the scoring criteria. And we had a stakeholder group of, I think, between 100 and 150 people that were part of that work group that looked at the scoring mechanisms and came up this as them believing this is the best way to score it with these types of ratings. Auditors certainly, the CSA auditors certainly have their opinions about breaking it out, but I know some of the people that were in those stakeholder meetings originally back in 2009 are in this meeting. So if you'd like to provide feedback on why, you guys thought that right criteria was better at the time, we'd certainly appreciate that. And we'll pull our records as well to see if we can find notes on what was tested back then to come up with this criteria and this particular weighting.
All right. Nothing as of right now. We'll be eager to get those comments. Sandeep?
All right. So the last proposed amendment that we will discuss in this meeting is the potential addition of the hazardous materials detail worksheet, which could be used to evaluate the hazardous materials of each area and can be seen on attachment B1E, which starts on page 984. This proposed section is comparable to the current fit Part 2B, the cleanliness detail sheet. The intention of this sheet is in response to discussions from the previous stakeholder meeting for the fit, where multiple stakeholders cited the improper storage of hazardous materials. In response to this discussion, OPSC has created a hazardous materials detail sheet, Part 2C of the fit, which aims to evaluate the presence and storage of hazardous materials in each area. The instructions of the hazardous materials detail worksheet on page 984 maintains the same percentages as the cleanliness detail worksheet and include the same ratings based upon the total yes percentage of the review. On page 985, you can see some examples that would be applicable to the use of the sheet, which include whether hazardous materials are labeled properly, whether chemical storage containers are intact with no evidence of leakage, current and dated inventory lists are posted, and whether potential sources of ignition are turned off. We'll leave this section on screen for a few moments so you can take it all in. So with that wraps up the discussion on the hazardous materials detail sheet. And as a reminder, these recommendations are just presented for discussion purposes only. And let's see. Looks like there's a question.
Yeah, I can go ahead and read it.
Yeah.
The auditor identified legitimate concerns regarding hazardous materials. However, I would encourage us to consider whether expanding the FIT is the best solution. Hazardous materials are already regulated by agencies with specialized expertise, including DPR, DTSC, Cal OSHA, the State Fire Marshal, and locals CUPAs. I'm not quite sure what that is. Rather than creating another inspection program, the state may achieve better outcomes through coordinated training, standardized guidance, and technical assistance while allowing the FIT to remain focused on its core purpose of evaluating whether schools are safe, clean, and functional. Thank you. That's a great comment. Something that we'll definitely consider. Pardon me. Um, any other questions before we move on? Cindy, was that the rest of your presentation, or is there more to go?
That was the last one. So I guess with that, that concludes OPSC's presentation on the facilities inspection tool today. OPSC invites stakeholder input on the specific recommended revisions and will review all feedback received in anticipation of a third stakeholder meeting to further this discussion. As a reminder, please provide any feedback by close of business Friday, July 10th. Thank you for your time, and now I will pass it back to Brian to open the floor for any lingering questions or comments.
Thanks, Sandeep. Yeah, this is a big endeavor too, and we know that there's a lot of concerns out there, and we're very interested in hearing them all. So, if you have any recommendations, a lot of these comments we got are really helpful and really interesting to us. So, whether you're sharing them today or if you're going to send them into us in writing or give one of us a call, please don't hesitate to do so. We really want to hear from you. We'll definitely factor it into our considerations, and we want that information. So. Please provide it if you can. I'm going to take just a quick break here for about a minute, give everybody a chance to take a breath. I want to thank the Department of Education for being so patient. We will be giving them their space next to do their presentations. But just before that, I wanted to pause for maybe about 30 seconds, give everybody a chance to go refill their water or take a quick break, and then we will continue. So just about 30 seconds or a minute, and we'll continue. Thank you. All right, Josh is trying to get me to laugh, but I'm not going to break. So we are going to continue, and I'm going to be turning this over to Courtney MacArthur from Department of Education. Courtney, are you ready to go?
I am ready.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Give me just a sec here, and I'll share your presentation. Let's see. Everybody should be able to see that now, hopefully.
Looks good to me.
All right. Well, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having us. Good morning, everybody. My name is Courtney MacArthur, and I'm the program manager for the Supporting Priority School Districts program, or SPSD, at the California Department of Education. Next slide, please. I just wanted to open up by thanking everyone for being here today and listening to our presentation. I believe this is the third time bringing this item to the group or this subject to the group. Please know that we do discuss and consider all of your feedback. And so we thank you for those that have given feedback previously on the SPSD program and those that will give feedback today or in the future. Next slide, please, for the agenda. First, I'm going to start with a brief overview of the program for anybody that is not familiar or perhaps just wants a refresher. And then I'm going to dive into the proposed regulatory changes since the last time we were here. There are some minor clarifying changes, but the bulk of the changes are centered around developing and maintaining a list of certified consultants that school districts can use for maintenance and construction projects. And of course, we will take questions and comments and your feedback at the end. So thank you. Background. How did we get here? July 2024, AB 247 was signed by Governor Newsom, establishing the State Augmentation of Federal Supporting America's School Infrastructure Grant Program for Priority School Districts, which is a very long way of saying that this program, the SPSD program, was modeled after another program that we call SASI, SASI, and that program uses federal dollars to give technical assistance to school districts, and the state decided to expand upon that. And so in November 2024, Proposition 2 was approved by California voters, authorizing the issuance of $10 billion in general obligation funds for K through 12 school facility repair, upgrade, and construction, including funding for the SPSD program. January 2025, the State Allocation Board allocated the funds for the SPSD program, and since then, most of the work has been regulatory. CDE introduced concepts to OPSC stakeholders in April and September 2025, as well as other partners in 2025. So, January 2026, the State Board of Education approved the start of rulemaking, and the 45-day public comment period ran from February to April. And then today, based on comments and consultation with state partners, CDE has prepared 15-day amendments. So these changes clarify eligibility and scoring, move the district application to an electronic process, and add the certified private construction consultant list and related ethics statement. So as of today, the program is still in rulemaking and will move into implementation after the final State Board of Education and Office of Administrative Law approval. To sum it up, thank you. Since January 2025, CDE's work has focused on building the SPSD program through conversations with our educational partners and through the formal rulemaking process. Because SPSD is a state program that requires regulations before implementation, we have been gathering feedback on how eligibility, scoring, applications, technical assistance, and consultant requirements should work in practice. As I mentioned, CDE presented early SPSD concepts at public meetings with OPSC in 2025, and since then, feedback from districts, county offices, school facilities partners, advocacy groups, and state partners has helped shape the draft regulations. The version we are discussing today reflects that work. So today's goal is to walk through those updates and hear feedback before the regulations move to the next step. So before we talk about these proposed regulations, let's first review what the SPSD program is. SPSD has 3 pieces to serve school districts. The first piece is providing direct help to school districts through technical assistance that our contractors will provide. That technical assistance includes assistance with and training in tools to determine if a school facility is in good repair, developing a school site inventory, assessing facility needs, estimating costs, prioritizing projects, identifying funding options, developing facility contracts, and also some elements of the facilities master plan. So how this looks in practice is districts in the SPSD program will have a site visit from a CDE contractor to complete visual assessments and what we're calling a facility condition report. And then the CDE will provide deliverables such as the fit assessment that is done, and our contractors will also provide training on these various topics so that schools can increase their capacity to do these sorts of things on their own in the future. The second SPSD function, oh, go back one, please. I know this is a long slide, bear with me. The second SPSD function is to increase collaboration efforts by participating in and facilitating regional learning and support. That means forming a network of support for priority school districts and any other interested districts, along with our partners at OPSC and DSA. This can look like joining existing networks or hosting our own gatherings. These would be open to all districts, not just those in the SPSD program. And then the final piece, that final outward facing piece, I should say, is around developing a library of online resources created by the department and its partners. So these resources will be available to any district. And included in here is developing and maintaining that consultant list that we will discuss later. There's also a fourth internal facing piece to this program, which is to build our internal expertise as CDE to continue this work after the program sunsets. One key point I want to emphasize is that the $5 million is not a direct grant pool for districts. It supports CDE's ability to help priority school districts assess their facilities, plan projects, and prepare for funding opportunities. Okay. Eligibility. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what is a priority school district? SPSD only requires that you meet one of the 4 criteria to apply for the program. So that is an enrollment of fewer than 2,501 pupils, or a high percentage of unduplicated pupils, or low gross bonding capacity per enrollment, or has not previously submitted an application for funding pursuant to the school facility program, or SFP. So if the number of interested districts exceeds capacity, the CDE will use a weighted scoring selection process to prioritize participants. In criteria 2 and 3 here, you can see the words high and low. So let's talk about those for a moment. Those, terms high and low were not defined in statute, so we define them in the regulations. We define a high UPC as being above the statewide average of 66%. And we calculated low gross bonding capacity per enrollment by sampling small school districts around the state, and we determined that 32,000 to be a low average. Next slide. These are our 4 statutory requirements for the criteria, again, along with the maximum number of points for each. On the top left, you can receive up to 4 points for low enrollment. So the smaller the district, the more points they receive. On the upper right, applicants that have never applied to the school facility program before will receive 8 points. On the lower left, you can see you receive up to 8 points for low gross bonding capacity, and you receive up to 4 points for a high unduplicated pupil count percentage. So since our last presentation here for you guys, the no prior SFP application on the upper right, that criteria has increased from 4 to 8 points. That gives more weight to districts that have never submitted a school facility program application and may need the most help understanding and accessing state facilities funding. There were also changes to the low enrollment criteria, which I'll cover on the next slide. So since the regulations were introduced, we have refined the enrollment scoring criteria. The initial regulations did not cap the largest band that you see on the bottom, meaning that any district above 1,001 students would receive a point. This has been corrected so that particular band only gives points to those within the enrollment range identified in statute. All right, next slide for the application process. We have intentionally designed the application process to be as simple as possible so that the districts that most need this type of help aren't discouraged from applying. So this method of application is another piece that has changed since the last time we were here. Rather than submitting a paper letter, the application will be a form that is online, and the rest of the application requirements are the same. SPSD will open a 60-day application window, which will be announced this winter in 2026 or early 2027 on the SPSD website, so you can keep an eye out for that. Next slide. Here are some of the minor changes that are included in this particular agenda item. So for clarity, we have added a definition to the regulations for priority school district. This helps avoid any confusion over the distinction between schools that meet the statutory definition of priority school district and those that are identified for direct technical assistance if we have more applicants than we can serve. So the new definition says that priority school district means any school district determined by the CDE to meet the requirements of the Ed Code, whether or not the school district is prioritized for direct technical assistance. So really just a point of clarity there. The regulations previously stated that the website would contain CDE developed resources. However, we have struck the words CDE developed from there so that this will allow us to share vetted resources from state, county, or other partners, meaning we're not just limiting ourselves to resources only developed by CDE. And then the superintendent will have the ability to make changes to the online application if necessary. We don't anticipate a need for this, but it just gives us greater flexibility to fix problems if applicants identify them. So that was another minor change added. And that kind of is the summary for the first item that we have today. Next, we're going to move on to CDE's second agenda item, which is the Certified Private Construction Consultant Certification List. But because these were divided into two items, I do want to pause here and just see if we have any questions or comments so far.
Nothing so far, but we can wait a second to see if anybody does have a question. There's none that are active right now. Okay, not seeing any.
Yeah, well, if any come to mind, of course, just put them in the chat, or, whatever. Okay, so moving on then to the certified consultant list, which is what I'm calling it for short. This list is for an individual consultant who supports school facility work, including planning, site acquisition, pre-construction, construction, project closeout. If a business or a firm offers these services, the business information is submitted in their application, but each individual consultant employed by that business who meets the definition must separately apply and complete the requirements. So under the proposed language, consultants would apply electronically through CDE's online system. They would provide their business information, proof of business status, a resume, and evidence of at least 1 year of recent relevant experience supporting California school districts or county offices of education. And then after CDE's review of that application, the applicants would also need to complete training, which CDE is developing along with OPSC and DSA. And I will talk more about that in a moment. Essentially the goal of maintaining a list like this is so that school districts have a vetted and trusted source to go to when they need to employ folks. And then it also is a safe place to get a consultant if you do receive that new construction and project management grant through OPSC. Because the funds for that grant, if you're going to pay a consultant, they have to be used for particular sorts of consultants. And this list is one of the ways that you can get a consultant like that. So, next slide here. Let's see. I'm not sure if we're on the same slide. Hang on. I think we're a slide behind. Yeah, there we go. Wait. You're on requirements. I'm on the ethics statement. There we go. Thank you. The proposed regulations also include an ethics statement and affirmation for folks getting on the consultant list. This is meant to protect local education agencies and the public by making clear that the listed consultants must comply with the law. They must avoid conflicts of interest, provide accurate information, avoid improper influence, cooperate with oversight, and not misrepresent what inclusion on the list means. So one important point that I want to make is that inclusion on the list is not a CDE endorsement. It does not guarantee project funding or approval and does not give a consultant special access to a public agency. Finally, these proposed regulations explain how CDE may deny, suspend, or revoke a consultant's list status and how consultants may appeal those decisions, which I'll talk more about in a couple slides. Let's see. Okay, so let's touch a little bit on the training that will be required to get on the list. To be added to the list, consultants must complete training once their initial application has been processed by CDE. The training is going to be offered via the Division of the State Architects online platform called DSA Academy. And CDE, DSA, and OPSC will all be providing essential elements of training to ensure that consultants are up to date on current laws, regulations, and best practices. Next slide, please. And so in terms of maintaining eligibility, consultants must maintain their eligibility to stay on the list. So CDE may deny, suspend, or revoke a consultant's inclusion on the list, as I mentioned before, if the consultant is not eligible to do business in California or fails to meet the certification requirements, if they provide false information, if they violate the required ethics statement. The proposed regulations also allow consultants to appeal a denial, suspension, or revocation in writing within 30 days. I just got a notification that my internet was going slow. Are you guys connected to me? Am I still sounding good?
Yeah, everything looks great.
Okay, good. So, when it comes to appeals, the appeals of a denial, suspension, or revocation of list status must be made to the CDE in writing and may be submitted electronically or via US mail within 30 days of notice of the action. And then complaints regarding a consultant included on the list must be made to CDE in writing and may be submitted electronically or via US mail. So that really sums up the bulk of the second agenda item that we had today, the consultant list. And here you can see my contact information. Again, my name is Courtney MacArthur. I'm the program manager for SPSD, and we have my info along with the SPSD webpage address at the very bottom. The email there goes to the SPSD mailbox, which I and others monitor, and then that phone number there is my direct line. Other than that, I guess I would like to say that if you want to join the mailing list for anything related to the SPSD program or the consultant list, please just email me at that email provided there, and yeah, we'll be posting updates on that web address. So with that, I'd like to see what other questions we have.
Courtney, yeah, we do have one question. It says, are all consultants included in this list, such as architects, manufacturers, and contractors, or is it just the contractors? Uh, yeah, so I think they're asking, is it just the actual consultants, like the facilities consultants, or does it also include manufacturers or maybe architects, like the design team?
I'm not sure about manufacturers. Yeah, my colleague Josh Speaks is saying all, so I'm gonna go with that.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question for now. We can leave it open for a few more minutes. There might be some more questions coming in, but again, thank you for being so patient. It's for everyone, Courtney included, for sitting through our presentations. This is very interesting information to us. We've never had anything like this before, so we're definitely interested in learning more about this process. We've been working with, like Courtney mentioned, we've been working with Department of Education, Division of State Architect on constructing the process, but it's a new venture for us, so we're hoping that it works out great. And the information on the SASE program is also very much appreciated, and I'm sure a lot of people got some really great info there too. So if you have feedback, you're on this item, you're like Courtney said, you should send it to them. If you, I can put it back up, but if you'd like, you can also send it to us, and we can make sure we get it over to them. I am going to put it back up here just to make sure that everybody had a chance to see it. Let's see, should be right there. And we do have one question, Courtney. It says, when will applications be available? I think they're talking about SASE program.
Well, I hope they're talking about SPSD program.
Right. That's what I meant. My
Okay,
bad.
yeah. I know they're like interchangeable because they are really so similar. Like SPSD was modeled off of SASE because it's such a great program. We're gonna announce it winter time, so either late this year or early next year. And you can check that out on our website, or you can be on the mailing list, and I can send out a mass email when the application opens. Yeah, we're hoping, sooner rather than later. We want to make sure that we get these regulations solid and the best that they can possibly be, and get those passed, and then open it up.
Sounds good. There's a couple more questions now. The first one, will the certified consultant list be divided or will be divided by, let me try to read this. It's not really phrased correctly. Will the certified consultant list be divided by R of the are of the state. Some consultants may not work
Area.
in all counties by area of the state. Some consultants may not be, yeah, some consultants may not work in all counties.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I appreciate that. We'll definitely be designing the end user interface for clarity and ease. Um, yeah, that's a great idea, and we'll definitely keep that in mind.
And then when do we expect the consultant list to be available?
Yeah, I think that'll be you know, definitely 2027. Because as I said, we want to make sure that we get these regulations solid. We also want to make sure that the training that we're developing with OPSC and DSA is thorough, is covering all the things that we want to cover, and ready to go. And so yeah, we're looking at 2027. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, so yes, we're working with other agencies and things like that. So
Pretty much as soon as possible, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, but we do have a lot to coordinate.
yeah,
Um, and then it says, when will the consultant application be available online? I think probably under that same timeline.
yep, yeah,
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's
Hey, Brian,
see.
going back to that earlier question on who's included on the list, and Courtney and Josh could certainly clarify. I think the intent is anyone can be on this list that wants to go through the training and register and be on this list. So, from a company standpoint, you could advertise that you're on the list. For the purposes of OPSC and the small school district program, if you receive the project and construction management grant and you intend to expend those funds on these types of service, you have to be on the list. So that's an important distinction there, but I don't believe we're limiting it or requiring anyone to be on it necessarily. So
yes,
a
thank
heads up for
you.
school districts that are getting that funding, though, you have to use it. If you get that grant, you have to spend at least $1 on those services, or you're going to require to return that grant too as well, because the grant is intended to hire those people.
Yeah, that's a great addition. Thank you, Michael.
All right, last chance for questions. Appreciate all of you that have been with us for the last 2 hours. I know your time's valuable and we appreciate your input very much. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Seeing no other questions, so I think we are ready to adjourn. Thanks again, CDE. Thank you, Sandeep and Chelsea, for your presentations today. Thanks everybody else for all of your input. Hope everybody has a great Friday and a great weekend, and we will be seeing you sometime soon. Take care.